This is a spoiler warning, you insignificant worms, so take heed, for I am Baal-Zaman, Heart of the Dark. The lowly mortal who creates this content has read the series cover to cover, book to book, many, many times. He will be discussing everything he can think of, irrelevant, relevant, regardless. So, take heed of my warning. If you have not read the series all the way through and spoil something for yourself, well, who is to blame, listener? Not I. Not I. Hello all, and welcome back to our second consecutive week of Gleeman Radio. I'm having a lot of fun with this, and I hope you guys are too. I'm your host, Tom, and before we get into anything else, I would like to do a brief shout out to our very first subscriber and commenter, Wist White. I hope I'm saying that correctly. What's also cool is their thumbnail appears to be Rise of the Neuroclan, so I like them even more. That's cool. I love that anime. So, yeah, I don't really want to take too much time on the introduction because this is, according to my Audible account, the longest chapter so far. So I'd really like to just get right into it. But before we do that, we do need to have a brief what happened last time on Chapter 4, The Gleeman. And, well, Tom Maryland, well, Cat, will you leave me alone? This is the second time I'm trying to record the introduction, because the cat keeps trying to get my attention. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry, I've interrupted 2 introductions now. So yeah, last time, Tom Maryland was introduced. Very cool. I probably like him so much because, 1, he's a fantastic and very interesting character. But 2, my name is Tom, and I'm an aspiring writer, so I don't think it's too surprising that I would gravitate to the master storyteller as a favorite character. And what's even more interesting is he gave a lot of information that will correlate to what happens later in this very book. He, for some reason, mentions he was a court bard. Other than Taviran, I have no explanation for that. He talks about warders, Trollocs, Aes Sedai, green men, and in one of his tellings of the stories, he talks about men running with animals. So much of what he brought up will actually happen in this very novel, which I find very, very interesting. So, yeah, Tom disappears when Moraine shows up and has a few, I don't know, coded words with him. Nynaeve comes out calling everybody idiots. Apparently she's trying to kick Moraine out of town for calling her a child. I don't know. Come on, Nynaeve, I want to root for you, but that's ridiculous. And Tam decides Rand and him are going back to the barn because the Dark Rider is obviously real, and they would prefer to make sure the house is alright. I think we all wish they'd made a different decision and stayed in town, because even though the town gets attacked, I don't know, the greater numbers would have been better. But yeah, that's what happens, so without further ado, let's just jump right into Chapter 5, Winternight, because I don't want to wait anymore. So let's just do that right now.
Some Trollocs can hear like a dog. Maybe better. But Trollocs are just... Rand let the words trail off. Not just a story. Not after tonight. Those things could be Trollocs or the Dark One himself, for all he knew. Are you sure? He whispered. I mean, Trollocs? I'm sure. Though what brought them to the 2 rivers? I never saw one before tonight, but I've talked with men who have, so I know a little. Maybe enough to keep us alive. Listen closely. A Trolloc can see better than a man in the dark, but bright lights blind them, for a time at least. That may be the only reason we got away from so many. Some can track by scent or sound, but they're said to be lazy. If we can keep out of their hands long enough, they should give up.
Alrighty then. I think that was the best chapter so far to date. I mean, I really, really like Chapter 4. But, I don't know, maybe I forgot how awesome Chapter 5 was. I just, going into it, I was just like, great. Rand's gonna get home, and him and Tam are gonna be attacked. This is going to be so much fun. But no, it was actually really fantastic. So, the chapter begins with Rand and Tam actually just arriving home, and the sun is not all the way down, but I think it's a bit past midday. And that's when we kind of, like, get a description of the farm and everything else. Apparently, it's not very big compared to most Two Rivers farms. But that's because, apparently, most of these farms have, like, huge generations of families. You know? I mean, think about Perrin's farm when you come back in Book 4. It had his cousins and his aunt and uncles and his grandparents and his parents. I mean, that's how most farms are in the Two Rivers. But Rand and Tam are the only ones there, so it's a bit smaller than most. Apparently, the yard is in the shape of a triangle. Not the yard, but the buildings. There's the farmhouse, which is square, and then nothing's in the shape of a triangle. The placement of the buildings is in the shape of a triangle. With the house, the barn, and the stone sheep shed, where they have some sheep in there. They have a shearing and curing sheds, because apparently most farmers in the Two Rivers can't get by with just their farm, so they also have to sell wool and tobacco. Tam is examining the ground intently, moving through all the buildings and around them, and checking the well for poison. He kind of dips his fingers in, and takes a sip, and then spits it out, and then he laughs, and he's like, well, maybe I'm being ridiculous. But when you really think about it, knowing who Tam really is, it kind of makes his investigation a little bit more meaningful. Like, you know, if Tam didn't spot anything, there really isn't anything. Or at least, nobody's been here yet. So that goes on with, before the lights goes down, they need to do more chores. They describe how work is never done on a farm, because as soon as you finish one thing, two more crop up in its place, which I think is amusing and probably very true. That's how it seems about the housework in my house, and we don't have nearly as much crap to do. Maybe I'm just lazy, we'll see. So Rand unsaddles and rubs down Bella with hay. He feeds Bella and the pigs, and the sheep and everything. He maintains the animals. He goes and takes care of the chickens. And he talks about how the chickens are getting more clever at hiding their eggs, because he only found like 3. And, I don't know, maybe you guys, maybe there's someone listening who has more experience with chickens than I do. When I was in high school, we lived just outside, we lived just on the outskirts of town in Oregon. And, we had chickens. My mom was super into it. It was a way to have extra eggs we didn't have to pay for, and kind of they turned into mom's pets. And I don't know, she wouldn't have really done well on a farm, because when one of them passed away, she wanted me to bury it, and my stepdad and I wanted to eat it. So I don't know. They never really hit the eggs. They were always in the egg box. So, I don't know. Maybe that's just something in the story, or maybe someone out there does know a little bit more about chickens hiding eggs. I've never experienced that. So they're continuing to do their chores, and Rand feels assured when he sees Tam come out to, like, mend a harness or something, that Tam still has his spear, which makes him feel better about having his bow with him. So this is a lot of talk about chores. I don't know why I put this much notes about chores, but they spend some time on it. Probably just to kind of world build here, this is everything they have on their farm, and he's gonna do some hoeing, but there's only there's only a little bit of weeds sprouting up, no vegetables, so they're worried about food, and, all that stuff. And finally, the end of the chores comes around. This went on for a while. I'm talking about chores way too much. He's cutting wood until about nightfall. And he doesn't remember the last time he didn't need to cut wood, because, the never-ending winter. And this is what he said, the reason I wrote it down, because it interests me. He was cutting pine for a quick hot flame, and he was cutting oak for long burning. Is that true? I don't think I've ever really cut firewood. We have a fireplace here at this house, but it hasn't been used in like 20 years. I mean, we only use the heaters. So I don't know. If you guys know that, let me know that too. This ends with them going into the house, and it's time to prepare for dinner. They describe the house as lived in, and I really like that. It's not spotless. There's a shirt hanging here or there. There's a book on the armchair with Tam's pipe rack and all that. It's not spotless. It's lived in, and that's actually how I prefer it. I honestly, when I go into a house that's too clean, I feel uncomfortable. I don't know if that's weird or not. I don't want things to get dirty. I'll admit I'm horrible at chores quite often, but I don't know. When a house is too clean, so Tam locks the doors as they prepare for dinner, which is something Rand has never experienced in his memory. That nobody in the Two Rivers not locks their doors because there's no need. So while he's busy setting the table, his father goes upstairs and Rand hears this big, heavy scraping. And he's like, holy crap, that's Dad pulling the chest out from under the bed. Another thing that he doesn't ever remember hearing. And when Tam comes back down, he has a sword belted to his waist. We finally get to see the heron-marked sword. It's got bronze herons on both the scabbard and the hilt. And Rand was kind of shocked. He's like, he never even considered that his father would own a sword. I mean, what's the point? He also notes that it looks like Lan's sword minus the herons. I think that's interesting because they're both power-out swords, and they're both described as katanas, single-edged, slightly curved blades that looks kind of fragile, but they're ridiculously strong. Which I love. I love how he said the majority of the swords he'd seen were from the merchant guards, and they were double-edged and big enough to cut down a tree. So, I'm imagining that the most of the swords Rand sees are broadswords and not katana. And Rand really wants to know how his father got the sword. This is a really curious notion for him, and he kind of starts asking his dad. And Tam wasn't super helpful in this kind of moment. He's like, I got it a long time ago and I paid too much for it. 2 coppers is too much for something like this. And Rand is shocked, He's like, maybe I should have given it away a long time ago. Your mother wanted me to, but I could never bring myself to do it. Yeah, Rand is shocked. He's like, why would you throw away the sword? It looks so grand and awesome, and I've always daydreamed of having a sword. Why would you throw it out? and Tam's just kind of like, well, what use is it? Can it shear sheep? Can it hoe crops? Can it, what use does this have? Tam is left by war behind. You know what I mean? I think a lot of Robert Jordan's work here is a lot of the veterans who know war never really relish going back to it. There's a scene much later in the series where, what's his name? Gareth Bryn. He's he learned at some point that there was no glory in war. Tam is he left it all behind. What's the use of a sword? And all that stuff. And I feel, oh goodness. So, I overskip myself. It'll be just a second. Tam's good instincts to bring out a weapon, we know it's a wonderful thing that he brought it out. Because he's saying, maybe I'm being crazy. Maybe the weather is blackening my mood. But I want to be ready just in case. And the stew's ready, and everybody's about ready to eat. Rand just has to get the tea. And Rand wonders where his father got the sword. And this always bothered me because we never got enough information on this, did we? We never really did. Moraine gives us a little bit of information in book 2, but it's not very long. And I don't know where I got this idea in my head. I swear I read it in an interview or somewhere that Rand was presented his heron-marked... Not Rand. Tam was presented his heron-marked blade by the King of Ilion himself. But I can't find that information everywhere. Anywhere. So what I decided to do is pull out my The Wheel of Time Companion, The People, Places, and History of the best-selling series by Robert Jordan, Harriet McDougall, Alan Roman Suk and Maria Simmons. I don't know how to pronounce Alan's last name. I do apologize. And I want to read Tam's thing here. Not the whole way through, but it gives me more information. I can speak, I promise, than I ever knew. Tam Althor, Rand's adoptive father. His full first name was Tamlin. Did anyone know that? Did any of you know his name was Tamlin? I didn't. He was a blocky, bluff man, about 5'10", with brown eyes and hair that was mostly gray with a little black. In 998 NE. I think that's New Era. That's the year that, this is happening right now in the story. But which turned completely gray by the time of the last battle. Well, it turned completely gray by book 4, but, let's go, whatever. Tam was born in 940 NE to a farming and shepherding family near Emmons Field, and ran away from home in 956 NE, so when he was 16, to see the world. He enlisted in the army of Ilion a year later in 957, and he fought in the White Cloak War from the summer of 957 through the autumn of 959, gained him an appointment to the elite companions. So only about 3 years after he left, he was part of the companions. He married a merchant's daughter in 965 NE, so when he was about 25, and gaining, I skipped something. Yeah, 965, he married Carrie, and this is where it gets sad. They had 2 children, a girl who died of a fever in infancy, and a boy who was stillborn. So, there's a reason Tam was so willing to scoop up an infant that needed help from the battlefield and take it home to his wife and raise him, They've had 2 children that didn't make it, and that's really kind of sad. An elite companion, married, merchant's daughter, 2 children. He became a blade master in 966 NE, a year after he married Kari, and when he was only 26, can you believe that? He served in 2 wars with Tyr from 962 to 965, gaining the commission as an officer, and from 970 to 976, rising to the 2nd captain of the Companions. It was generally known that he would have received this honor sooner, and likely to have risen to 1st captain had he been an Illianer. So since he was an Andorran Outlander, they couldn't bring him to the top spot, but he would have gotten up there much quicker or gone all the way if he had not been from far away. That's all I really want to read from that. I mean, it goes on to talk about, when the Trollocs come, and Moraine saving him, and, Cadzawain manipulating him. The only last bit I want to talk about is that before the last battle, Tam recruited more men from the 2 rivers, and when he went to battle again, it was with Perrin's army, which he commanded after Perrin left to help Rand. Perrin also made him a lord and steward of the 2 rivers. This has always been a question for me, even though it's way towards the end of the series. Fael is the next in line to gain Saldaea, but they're also the steward and lords of the 2 river. And so I was like, what will happen? They will go to Saldaea, right? But they have other responsibilities. But no. As it turns out, Tam is now the Lord of the 2 Rivers, which is cool, but I don't actually expect him to stay there, to be honest. I always expected Tam to move into the royal palace after Tarmangaiden, take care of his grandchildren, but I don't know. I am going so off topic, it's not even funny here. So I read that, Tam's entry in the Companions. Yeah, so he was 38 by the time he came home. And he's 58 in the story currently. So Tam is getting on in years, but he's obviously still younger than Tom Marilyn. That's what it was. So this is it. Just as Rand is getting the tea, and it's about time to have dinner, he's holding the teapot in his hand with the towel so it doesn't burn him. There's this huge bang on the door. And they're like, holy crap, what was that? And I love how for a second, Rand is wondering if it's the nearest neighbor. I don't remember the name they gave. But they called him a shameless borrower. But that the nearest farm was still like a whiles away. And it would be kind of odd for them to come over even in the middle of the night, no matter how shameless of a borrower they are. And that's when the locked door bangs open, splittering off the wall, and a huge figure in spiked armor with a scythe-like sword fills the doorway. One arm to shield its eyes from the light. And just like that, we have our first Trollocs of the series. Hooray! Oh, man. So we all know Tam was going to be awesome in this moment, regardless to the fact that he gets a little hurt later. It was only a scratch, and he was outnumbered by Trollocs. Something he admits in just a little bit that he's never actually encountered in person before. Just showing that even though Tam probably hasn't used his sword in 20 years, he's still got some skill. I was wondering in Chapter 1, if Tam had encountered the Fade with his sword on him, could he have won? And again, I'm still not sure at this moment. Tam, in practice with his sword, I have no doubts. Tam, 20 years out of practice and getting scratched by a Trolloc, I don't think this Tam could have won. Maybe Book 4 Tam after he's getting back in practice, but I don't know. But what impresses me is how Rand acts in this. I mean, yes, he is terrified, but his first action through a scream of terror is to throw the boiling hot kettle at the Trolloc, and it kind of works. You know, this scream of boiling water, and then Tam comes in and cuts him down, and then another one tries to get past, and Tam cuts him down. It's crazy. Tam may be out of practice here, but he is obviously no joke, you know? Maybe the sword is kind of like riding the bike. You never entirely forget, you know? So Tam sends Rand running off. You know, run, lad, it's dangerous, go out the back. And Rand is ashamed that he runs as quickly as he does, but he does. But he's smart about it. Like, he's ashamed he runs off, but he goes to the back door, sees that it's locked, that it's never locked, and instead of deciding to opening the door, he instead goes through a window, which is good because he's trying to keep his dad from being ambushed from behind, and there are Trollocs, like, right out to the back door, too. So he does get out the window and kind of get around as Trollocs are breaking in the back door. He had good intentions, but he at least brought his dad a few moments, right? So again, Rand impresses me. He's running towards the shadows of the forest, right? But instead of going all the way in, he just drops to his belly and then, like, crawls back towards the barn because he can't stop thinking about his father. He ran off, but not away, because he's constantly thinking, how can I help Dad? How can I help Dad? That to me, that's cool. So he sees the back door knocked down, hanging off its hinges. He sees shadowed shapes and low guttural voices, harsh languages not suited to the human tongue, the sound of steel on steel. I'm just saying, for Rand's first encounter with Trollocs, fear not, he's doing well. He's thinking logically. He is terrified, but he is making efforts, you know? Hiding in the shadows, but not running off because he doesn't want to abandon his father. I just really like that. There is no shame in being afraid. There's only a problem if you don't act. If you let that fear hold you back. And I love how while he's lecturing himself to be so afraid, he's, what is it? The hoe handle falls over on top of him, and he freaks out thinking it's more than it is. And then when he realizes how dumb he was there for a second, he calls himself a Copland fool. So the Coplans and Congers are actually used in insults now. That's great. So yeah, his dad's still fighting in the house. And he yells for his dad that, no, Dad, I'm out here. So Tam bursts through the window, and hearing his son, which is really cool. What What is going on with my phone? Hearing his son, he actually points in the wrong direction and starts running that way and saying, like, run, lad, run! Which is cool, because in this moment, Tam is trying to throw off the Trollocs, which he actually pulls off before. That's cool. So Rand does what his father says. He's like, I'm gonna move like I'm stalking rabbits. Which has always been kind of a thing of contention in the series. Like, every time a Two Rivers person is in a situation and they want to move through unseen, they talk about moving like stalking rabbits. Like, when Nynaeve breaks into the White Cloak camp later in the series, she's gonna move like she's stalking rabbits. And I've heard people be like, well, how, like, these are soldiers, not rabbits and everything. But then they also describe that it used to be a game for these Two Rivers kids to run around the forest and sneak up on each other. I don't know how many of you have spent a good amount of time in the woods, but woods are loud. You have to pay attention not to step on twigs, step on leaves, you have to be very careful. And for these kids to make a game out of stalking each other in the woods probably mean they can move ridiculously quietly, which I love. So Rand is kind of hiding in the trees. He's not feeling great about it. He thinks the woods are just kind of terrifying right now. These woods he's known his whole life and has always felt safe in are suddenly feeling ominous, and the shadows deeper than ever before, and the wind making the limbs scratch against each other is freaking him out, and he's afraid. He really is. And that's when his father comes up from behind and grabs his wrist and covers his mouth. And it turns out this was not the best move by Tam. Because, Rand almost hurts him. And he's like, it's me, lad. If I'd remembered how big you've been getting, I probably wouldn't have done that. So he slides down exhaustedly. Rand is infinitely relieved that his father has found him. And they start talking. This is, I keep getting lost in my notes. Where am I? I am so sorry, guys. What even makes it a little bit more embarrassing about getting lost in my notes is that I'm trying to remember the lines that are actually in my quote of the episode. Are you... So, yeah, this is when Tam's saying he's never seen a Trolloc before, but he's spoken to men who have, so he knows a little bit. As Trollocs can hear like a dog, maybe better. They can see well in the dark. They can smell very well and hear very well. Basically, Trollocs have animal senses that make it easier to catch their prey, which makes it really funny when Tam says he lost them incredibly easily. He tells Rand that they killed for the pleasure of killing. Yeah, and that Tam didn't really have a hard time getting rid of him, which is funny to me. But Tam is wounded. Rand's a little concerned, but Tam's like, it's just a scratch, nothing to worry about. At least the weather is getting warmer. Staying out here might not be so bad tonight. And Rand's kind of freaking out a little bit because, no, it's not warming up. I was just thinking about getting my coat and cloak. My coat and cloak. So, Tam already has a fever this early, and it's a bit concerning. So Rand wants to immediately take Tam to Nynaeve, but as he tries to pull his father to his feet, Tam just has this, awful, horrible groan of pain. And Rand quickly puts his father back down. This is a bit more than a scratch to justify, he's thinking, So Rand's like, I can't do this. He's going to go back to the house for supplies and pray to God the Trollocs are gone. Or pray to the Creator that the Trollocs are gone. So he drops the hoe handle, because what use will that do? He thought it almost laughable, and instead draws his father's sword, and makes a few kind of swings in the air, and he's like, well, that swinging in the air is easy, Plus, it's just a hunk of metal in his hands. At this point, Rand does not know how to fight with a sword. It's basically no more impressive than the hoe handle, except slightly more durable, you know what I mean? So yeah, he was desperately afraid, but he had no choice. He makes his way back to the farmhouse very slowly, kind of drops onto his belly and starts crawling through. And, he's looking through the house and seeing the candle light in the house, and it's just the candles Dad lit. It's just the candles. There's no Trollocs in there waiting for me. He's getting more and more and more terrified, and this is when he notices something even more terrifying. There is no sound at all. And you'd think that's what you want, right? You're being pursued by scary monsters. You want silence. But what he's noticing is there's always sound on his farm. The cows or the horses or something. There's always something making noise. So he kind of crawls over to the stone sheep pen and slowly, kind of reaches his arm in to touch one of the sheep. He sees them laying there, but nothing, and his hand comes away wet with blood. And he remembers his father saying they kill for the sake of killing. They enjoy it. And yeah, he's even more afraid, and he's nauseous, and he is wanting to get out of there. But if he ran back, how would he help his father? There's stuff in the house he needs. There's bandages, there's clothes, there's blankets, there's, Bell in the cart, there's his bow, there's medical supplies. So he has no choice. So he finally makes it to the house, and he notices the stew is ruined. None of the furniture in the house is left whole. Everything has been smashed and destroyed. The Trollocs have spread over salt and flour, cutting those bags open and went flying, so everything's covered in white powder. But what he notices even more than all that is the stench. I forgot about Trollocs and shit. I really did. But there's vile smearings all over the wall. So how do you think that works? I mean, do you think a Trolloc just kind of hunches over, fills their hand, and starts smearing on the walls? That is disgusting. I mean, just awful. So Rand starts trying to get things together. But then one of the Trolloc bodies on the floor just gets up, and we meet Narg, probably the most famous individual Trolloc, because I think he's the only Trolloc with a name, and the only Trolloc we ever hear speaking human language. I don't know. Maybe you guys can correct me on that. It's broken English. Narg stay, Narg smart. He has a wolf muzzle and goat hooves. And he's stepping towards Rand, and he's like, don't do anything. You stay here. Others leave. Narg stay. Narg, no people come back. Murdral want to talk to you. You wait here. And Rand is terrified. What do you guys think Agenor would think about Narg? Is Narg a singularity among Trollocs? Do you think Agenor would be fascinated or disgusted and angry that a Trolloc is thinking for itself? I don't know. That's just something that popped in my head right there. Yeah, so Rand again, he's being practical, he's he tries to talk, Narg to, what do they want from me? What are you doing? Alright, maybe I'll wait, and he kind of lowers his sword and kind of pretends to play along. He's not sure he trusts him, but, what else can he do? He's terrified. Rand may be a big young man, but this Trolloc is, huge. And that's when Narg lunges. I don't really know if Narg actually was truly planning on holding him until the Murdral came back, or if this was just his clever way to kill Rand. But he tries to go at him, and Rand brings his sword back up just in time, his lucky break, and Narg impales himself on Rand's sword. But he doesn't die instantly. He's still snapping and struggling against him. Poor Rand has to be terrified. It's just awful. He killed it by mistake, which is really good luck for Rand. But he has to be just shaken and just terrified. So he decides he can't really wait around that much longer. It is much too dangerous if the Trollocs, and especially a Murdral, is coming back. This is where he's like, the stories say Murdral, or Fades, whatever you want to call them, are 20 feet tall with eyes of fire and rode shadows like horses. And when a Fade turned sideways, it disappeared, and no wall could stop them. Isn't that a little interesting? Do you think that's the tales being spread around that's kind of mixing Baalzamon with Murdral? I mean, the eyes of fire is a very pointed description. Especially when you know that, Murdrals actually can disappear into shadows that are dark enough. I don't quite know how that works, but they are kind of not fully in the world. And if they kind of step into a deep enough shadow, they can go somewhere else with a deep enough shadow. But I kind of just love the stories say, and the stories are really not worth listening to here. He retrieved his sword from Narg, cleaned it with a scrap of shirt that used to belong to Tam, gathered blankets, clean clothes for bandaging, coats and cloaks for warmth, a water bag, for hydration, and a clean shirt because now he's all bloody and he doesn't want Egwene to see him, not looking at his best, I'm making a joke there, but I don't quite understand entirely why he goes through the trouble of a change of shirt. He's like, I don't know when I'll be able to change into it, but I want it. I don't know. I can't speak much for this being ridiculous because me personally, I can't handle having my hands sticky or greasy or anything like that. I just can't. I have to get up and wash my hands. I can't do it. So maybe just Rand couldn't deal with the Trolloc blood stained shirt, even in the situation. He just I need to get something else. Maybe the tiniest thing to help him make him feel better is the right step in this situation. I don't know. He's about to try to grab the medicine. I don't remember what it's all called, willow bark and other stuff. But apparently the Trollocs found the medicine bowl and shit in it. I don't know. It was a pile of stink that he was afraid to go too near to. I can't think of anything else. So Trollocs are real jerks. So he grabs everything he grabbed. He threw it outside. He takes a lantern and kind of heads into the barn, hoping to get Bella. But Bella is gone, and the cart is broken. And he's a little bit worried now. He doesn't know what he's supposed to do. He can't carry his father back to the Two Rivers. For one thing, he didn't think he'd have the strength to do it himself. And secondly, the pain of it might kill his father, and that's the last thing he wants. So he's starting to get really worried, and then he just kind of analyzes the cart a little bit better and smiles, and he decides he's going to turn it into a litter. So he kind of tries breaking it down, and then he pulls out the sword and he cuts it loose. I don't know what he's cutting it in the shape of. He's just turning the cart into a litter. And he's kind of amazed as he looks at the sword, because he comments that after cutting through the thick, hard wood of the cart, and the best axe would have needed sharpened. But the sword still looks freshly polished and sharpened, and he puts his thumb to it and kind of cuts his finger. So, yeah, the blade is still sharp. The first time him learning about the power wrought blades, right? He returns to his father, carrying the litter and all of his supplies. Carrying, not dragging, because he didn't want to leave a trail to his father. Tam wakes up barely, and he's like, "Is that you, boy? I was worried about you. Having dreams of the past and nightmares. No, dreams of days past. I like the way that was said. And nightmares, which we know what that is. So apparently Tam dreamed through his earlier stuff, and in the next chapter we're going to hear about Tam and the Aiel War." So yeah, the chapter ends with Rand beginning to bandage his father and assuring him that everything's going to be alright, because all he has to do is get his father to the Two Rivers and to Emond's Field and Nynaeve, and everything is going to be okay. Yeah, that's the end of the chapter. Don't give Rand too much of a hard time, because he doesn't know that Emond's Field got attacked as well. So, yeah, that was the end of the chapter, and it was good. There was so much action. Rand actually proved himself doing pretty good. Yes, he did not face the Trolloc down, but the two times he was confronted with one, he attacked, or at least defended himself. He was clever, and he wasn't so overcome by fear that he couldn't think rationally, and I love that aspect. So, yeah, I don't think there's any reason to keep drawing this out. That is the end of Chapter 5, Winternight, and I'm excited to get into the next chapter. So, yeah, that sums it up for this chapter, guys. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope you are enjoying this series as a whole, because I'm having a fun time making this podcast series. I hope people are reading along with me, or at least just using this to kind of refresh themselves with the series, because I'm pretty sure we are all extraordinarily excited for the TV show coming soon. As always, apparently, I'm going to be ending these podcasts with a bit of a request. If you are an artist and would love to draw something to Wheel of Time, I do not think there's enough Wheel of Time fan art in this world, so draw something up, send it to me at gleemanradio@gmail.com, and I will give you a shout out for how awesome you are as I feature it on the YouTube video version of this podcast, and I will put it on my Twitter when I next get into it and shout it out there. You guys are amazing! Also, if you think you can record my spoiler intro better than me, I would love to see what character voices you guys can come up with, and you can send me that at gleemanradio@gmail.com too. No pressure at all. Nobody has to do this. I just think it would be a fun way, if anybody really is enjoying this podcast, to kind of have their own participation in it. You know, they can go into this episode or that episode years later and be like, see that, that, I did that. How cool is that? I made that picture, or I made that intro, or I don't know. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, wherever you are, morning, afternoon, or evening. Peace out. Take care. Bye.